On February 4th, 2003, the Bathurst design group released NASCAR Racing 2003 season for Windows and Mac. It was the sixth game in their NASCAR Racing series, and marked possibly the greatest release yet. However, what Bathurst and Sierra Entertainment didn't realize, this release would turn out to be their last. Bathurst had been making NASCAR games since the mid-90s, slowly improving their product up to the release of NR 2003. NR 2002 was the first game not numerically numbered. The previous four were all named NASCAR Racing 1 through 4. Like most of Bathurst's releases, they released NR 2003 before Speed Weeks in February. The cover of the game featured Cup Series sophomore Jimmie Johnson edging out Kevin Harvick, the front row starters of that previous year's Daytona 500. This cover would also predict a duel finish between these two drivers nearly 7 years later, but that's a different story. The base game came with the 23 Winston Cup tracks at the time, along with night variants of Bristol and Daytona. The game also came with 40 Cup drivers from the circuit, including every big-name team except Chip Ganassi Racing. The Ganassi cars were not included due to a licensing situation, but what they did mark was one of the first pieces of modded content made for the game. More on that later. The game came with a plethora of fantasy drivers as well, many named after various developers, including the most iconic one being the driver of the number 86 Bathurst car, Fred Jones. Jones's car is what by default you were set to drive. If you wanted to change that, you'd have to go to the Player Info tab, to which you would have to tab through the car files or scroll down the list to pick a car file you wanted to drive as. Speaking of car files, this brings us back to the previous point pertaining to moddable content. Car files were the first things being made for NR 2003. Since the Ganassi cars were not featured, many people exported other Dodge files and modified their TGAs. They would then import them back in the game, as NR had instituted a way to make new drivers, and had sped up the process with an import-export button in the Opponent Managers tab. Still to this day, this little feature of being able to export and import schemes has been crucial in this game surviving 2 decades. It has given people the freedom to devise any scheme they want, import it in, and either race as it or against it. This allowed for the expansion of league racing and multiplayer. Each driver participating could paint their own car, run their own number, which for the early 2000s was groundbreaking. Most people didn't have schemes or connection was incredibly poor. NR 2003, however, had Sierra hosting servers, which breathed life into the online racing scene like never before. People like Dale Earnhardt Jr., Brad Keselowski, Denny Hamlin, and Josh Berry raced across various NR leagues during this time. If you knew or know of somebody who did race during NR 2003's first years, they probably at some point raced against one of the aforementioned drivers. NASCAR Racing 2003 laid the groundwork for what we know today as modern online racing, a branch of motorsports that seems to grow every year. But while Bathurst and the NASCAR Racing Series seemed to just be reaching its peak, it would all come to an end in one devastating decision. At the time of NR 2003's release, 2 other companies were making NASCAR games. Monster Games and their NASCAR Heat series, reaching their peak with Dirt to Daytona, and Electronic Arts, or better known as EA, and their sports division, making the NASCAR Thunder series. They had reached their peak with NASCAR Thunder 04, and EA saw something, an opportunity. During the early 2000s, EA was quietly monopolizing sports gaming, buying exclusive licenses left and right. They swept away from 2K their NFL series, and made Madden the one-stop shop for NFL gaming. NHL, FIFA, and college football all followed the streamline of EA Sports gaming, and naturally, NASCAR was next. Whilst Bathurst was hard at work updating the game, they were notified that EA had acquired the exclusive license. They were no longer allowed to release anything pertaining to NASCAR officially. Their main stream of income was gone. It was less than 2 months later, Bathurst would shut down altogether, and David Kemmer, a former worker there, bought the source code of NR, along with various assets, brought them to his company called First LLC, and Sierra was the only thing keeping the online servers up. League Racing therefore wasn't influenced directly by the purchase at first, but what we did miss out on was what Bathurst was working on before the license. It was later found out that Bathurst was planning to add red flags to NR, along with fire animations, and even rain. Whilst people have tried to recover what they can from the code, information is so sparse with these updates that it's hard to understand what it would have actually been like. There is NR game files for sounds of fire animations, along with a texture. Bathurst was working on something else though, something that was released before it was too late. Mods. Nowadays, many people who use the game know of the mods of NR 2003, but back in the early years, there was none. until Project Wildfire and their release of the first 3 NR mods: PWF CTS, PWF GNS, and the Trans Am mod. What not many people had realized was NR had built in 4 sets of physics. All of these provided varying ways in how the car handled and raced, again helping inject even more life in the NR 2003. Project Wildfire had deep affiliation with Papyrus, therefore whilst these are technically mods, they are in some eyes free DLC for the game. But once it became apparent development of the game had ceased completely, the first independent NR 2003 mod went into development. Aero 88 was devised by the US Pits team using CTS physics, building off the 1988 Cup Series season. It released in 2004 to mass acclaim, and still to this day, nearly 20 years later after the mod's release, is in some regards still the greatest NR mod ever. A full car set was made for it, and kicked the door wide open for the NR modding community. IndyCar, Aussie V8, Pro Stocks, Modifieds, Super Sprints, all streamed out over the next few years. Yet to be mentioned, but also during this time, a plethora of tracks were being released, varying from custom-made ones to updates to the ones already in the game. With Nextel taking over sponsorship in Cup in 2004, a group worked on something called the Nextel Update, replacing the NASCAR racing logos at tracks with Nextel logos. Project Wildfire also released a plethora of tracks: Bowman Gray, Evergreen Speedway, Hickory, Updated Homestead, I-70, IRP, Mesa Marin, Nashville, and the Milwaukee Mile. On NR2K Weebly, the first listed track in terms of age for NR was Dover 1990, which was imported from a previous game. Track modding had been prevalent in the previous iterations of NASCAR racing as well. NR 2002 tracks were easily importable in NR 2003. And during this time, one of the most famous NR tracks called Talladega BR was made. BR stands for Brian Ring, the creator of the track, and it became famous for its great online racing. And even as of late, in the 2010s, Dale Jr. referenced it to Martin Truex Jr. for drafting code at Talladega. In 2006, the first NR YouTube video was uploaded, showcasing various aspects of the modded game. It was uploaded by a channel called CMK44. From there, YouTube videos of NR exploded. It was at this point arguably one of the most popular videos of NR 2003 came out, titled NASCAR Racing 2003 Season at its Greatest. It was by 24 Camshaft 24, and currently the video has 2.4 million views. Everything for the game seemed to be going great. It was full of life. It was standing its own against the rival EA games. But an attack was coming. One from somewhere not expected. The people who created the masterpiece itself. During this time, a group began working on a project titled Redline GTP. The mod focused on late 80s Group C endurance racing. It was a complete overhaul of the game, including editing EXEs to get the physics as correct as possible. However, you may remember the David Kamer and First LLC purchase of the assets. It made it illegal to modify the source code. The group believed, though, they were in the right, as the modifications they made to the source code were not for sale. Simply modding the game and then putting it up for download for free, they thought would fall under legal stature. This was when many realized the previous mentioned updates of rain, fog, and red flags that were discovered to be in production but never implemented. The mod, however, is praised as being one of the most innovative physics edits of all time. But Kamer and First LLC did not see it as that. They threatened legal action, and the mod quickly was taken down. It was edited into a normal mod, but the online scare had been done. Fast LLC didn't let up. They went to court with the Redline team, and began an all-out war against modding the now 3-year-old game. Whilst this is one of the most infamous times in our history, what's forgotten is that Kamer and First LLC failed. They lost the lawsuit. What's also lost was the eventual realization of what the real motivation was. First LLC in the upcoming year would soon be transformed into a company called iRacing, and they began marketing a new online game for 2006 and 2007. NR 2003 was still dominating the online racing scene, and iRacing wanted to stump and kill NR 2003 modding to try and drive as much attention to the new subscriber-based platform as possible. It is perhaps the biggest online heel turn of a company to its fans in NASCAR gaming history. The company that gave us a platform for so much was now trying to take it away. 2006 saw no new releases of any large mods, and iRacing was building steam. The game was closing in at 4 years old now, and it appeared the hype was running out. But people didn't give up. Tracks were still being made, and leagues were still being run. And in 2007, with the advent of the new car tomorrow, mods began coming up again. The stumping had failed. A new Nationwide Series mod, 2 Cop mods, a NASCAR Nextel mod, and other smaller series. Even the trucks had an updated mod eventually, and NR 2003 was pushing on. It outlasted EA's stance with the sport, as after 2009 they would cut their ties. iRacing by this point was still struggling to completely establish itself as an actual online racing platform. And NR's popularity was so prevalent through the late 2000s and early 2010s, there was actually a split of mods being made for Cup. 2 different leagues, one by the name of the Bullring Group, another by the name of the Design Mod Racing Team. From 2010 to 2012, 2 mods for each season was made. NR's popularity also took off in a sense of offline leagues. People began running series where the AI would run for you, and you could sign up in the comments of the videos. And modern NASCAR drivers such as Carson Hocevar and Rajat Caruth were rumored to have signed up for leagues like this. I myself even ran an offline league at one point, on this very channel. And I was lucky enough to have the legendary Zachary Fitzwater run the series. Zachary Fitzwater is probably one of the best offline drivers in history. If you have watched an offline NR league, Fitzwater has probably been in it. Even today, leagues like the NSDCA, ERR, NNSCRA, and various others persist well into their double-digit seasons. For online leagues, probably some of the biggest would have to be the FSB League, which has run for years, and other more modern ones including ERPS, Meloncar, USORL, and JerryCar. Back to content of NR 2003, TNT Man 93 became the first full NR 2003 YouTuber to gain substantial prominence. He became the biggest NASCAR YouTuber in general, before being passed by Eric Estep. But still, TNT Man is one of the biggest and is probably one of the most iconic. His Idiots of NASCAR series still transcends time as one of the best NR series ever. The Greatest Hits video now has 17 million views. And as we push past the 10-year anniversary of the game, another trend began taking over the NR community. What If series. Griffdog and his What If Dale Earnhardt series sparked others and their own ideas. And of course, the most iconic What If series of them all. What if Davey Allison was still alive? I can dream, damn it, alright? As the 2010s came and went, and iRacing's popularity grew, NR's unwavered. It was still a free, active game. And for some, why pay the subscription to iRacing when NR was easier to run and cheaper? Yes, you did have to go through the early days of some shadier ways to get the game, but as it became abandonware, it's easier than ever to access the game now. To access an actual copy of it, though, well, NR survived Eutechnic's run of NASCAR games, and later survived Monster Games' second run with it. I would also bet it's safe to say it'll outlast Motorsports Games' time with the NASCAR license, as NASCAR 21 Ignition was, well, horrible. 20 years this game has persisted. Mods are still being made, series being run, tracks being made, and cars being painted. Do you want to race against the modern Cup field? There is a car set and mod. Want to run the 1970 season? Somebody did a whole project on that. Street stocks, open wheel, endurance racing. If it's been ran, it's probably on NR. It is a masterpiece of NASCAR gaming. Will we ever see something replace it? We are closing in on a quarter century and there's still nothing in sight. The legacy of NR 2003 is one of the most prolific in gaming history, and the best way it can be summed up is by one simple phrase. RAB2, 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 8869.